Hi, everyone. My name is Jacob Bloch, and I am the founder and president of Passport Experiences. I am a Wharton grad. I graduated from Wharton in 2018. I had actually graduated a year early. I started school in 2015. I had studied finance. Thank you all for coming to this presentation and also being a part of this and supporting the Global Game Changers Summit. It's really tremendous to be a part of it, and I appreciate that you stopped by for this segment. Hopefully the title piqued your interest, What Plankton Teaches You About DCF Models. So I am the CEO of Passport Experiences. Passport Experiences is developing Passport Springs, which is a 10-acre immersive hot spring, which will be debuting on the East Coast. Our first location and our flagship is in Atlanta. Passport Springs is recreating the most celebrated hot springs from across the globe. So this 10-acre venue is divided into 4 countries. And each of these 4 countries replicates the mineral content of our pools of hot springs from around the world. So not only are we recreating the same mineral content, but the architectural features and landscaping, sights, sounds, and cuisines from these places. One of the places that I will be discussing later is Costa Rica and some of the infamous bioluminescent pools that exist there and what that taught me about how to value businesses. And I'd love to share that with all of you. So each of our venues, each one of our country pavilions, as I mentioned, is recreating a different region. So in Israel, we said, let's recreate. Here are a few of the pictures of some of these places. But in Israel, we said, let's recreate some of the most notable experiences there. One of these being the Dead Sea. So we've done that. We will be recreating the largest Dead Sea flotation pool in North America. It will actually be the second largest in the world, second only to the Dead Sea itself, as well as some other hot springs from Israel, such as Tiberias. We'll also have other signature experiences like the mud and clay experience of Israel. In Japan, we're recreating some of the most notable hot springs, such as Kusatsu. And again, this has the same mineral content as these places, while also being surrounded by the same architectural features of these places. So that means shoji screens and bonsai landscaping with koi ponds that have red bridges that go over them, and they'll reflect and shimmer in pools. When you're in Italy, you'll soak in our recreation of Saturnia hot springs. And one of these pools is going to be placed under a domed roof with an oculus light, a pantheon. And then outside, there will be more Roman columns and ruins, fountains, and statuaries. In Costa Rica, you'll be able to walk across a bridge and then go to one of our bar areas, which has the same raffia roofing and palm fronds that you see in Costa Rica, and soak in some of our pools like Arenal Hot Springs. These pools will be surrounded by very lush landscaping, and we'll have buildings that look like they're a treehouse. You'll see that there's incredible amounts of rockscaping and waterfalls that trickle into some of our pools. Then lastly, we have a recreation of the Gellert Baths from Budapest, which will be at the center of this venue, linking each one of these. So as I was meeting with media and just members of the public, attending public hearings in order to advance our entitlements process, our permits process for Passport Springs, some people would give recommendations because they saw what we were doing was extraordinary. And they said, Jacob, can you recreate this experience? They said, can you recreate, for example, the volcanic sandbathing that you experienced in Japan? And we said, sure, we can do it. And that's what we've done. We've included a recreation of Japanese sandbathing, which is the steaming sand that comes from the ground and is caused by a volcano in one part of Japan. Or someone else mentioned, in Rome, in Italy, there are these salt caves. Are you able to recreate those? And we've done that. And now we've created an entire grotto experience from sauna to steam room to snow room to salt cave. But one meeting I had was with someone who said, can you recreate a bioluminescent bay? Because this is something that they had experienced back home. And there are a few of these around the world One of them is in Costa Rica, as I'm showing here, but then there are these other ones that exist, such as in Puerto Rico, or you can go off the Cape, the water near Algarve. This was a real challenge for us. Can you recreate bioluminescence? So let me just show you what that looks like. It's water that glows. As you run your hand through it, it lights up, and it's really magical. It's magic. And I said, I said to this person, this journalist, I'll try. So I met with these scientists, these marine biologists, and then chemists to understand, how does this work? How does bioluminescence work? And in this case, for that type of, for the water that I just presented, it's this. This is a type of plankton. This plankton exhibits a special quality of bioluminescence, and it's been studied for decades. It also sometimes occurs in different types of, there are plants that exhibit the same property. So when you go to the bioluminescent bay in Costa Rica, which I just showed, the pool lights up because of a massive amount of this plankton, kind of like an algae that you're looking at over here. So again, for context, I studied finance at Wharton, and while going to Penn, this is an excellent school, I didn't have a background. My background in science is really limited. I only took 2 classes in the sciences because it was required of me in order to fulfill the science requirement of Wharton. So I met anyway with these scientists to understand, how does this work? And what I learned is that there are very specific conditions which allow it to work. It's so, sometimes these algae, actually, they get so disturbed that they just die. It's part of the reason that in some of these bays, people aren't even allowed to swim anymore. If they want to look at the bioluminescence, they have to use a boat. They have to go in a little canoe boat, and they get to see it as it interacts with their oar, rather than their entire body disturbing it. And also, a number of years ago, when there were hurricanes in this region, some of these bioluminescent bays died off. Again, there's very specific conditions in terms of climate and the water and heat that allows this plankton to exist. So what I learned from the scientists is that we're not going to be able to just put some of this plankton in our water. So therefore, I started with what I call option 0. I looked at Walmart, and I saw, is there some type of plankton that we could buy in order to add in? So what you're looking at over here is what I saw, and I thought, this is, excellent. For $26, we can get 1 liter. But this is dinoflagellate, but the medium for it, meaning this is the medium that it will grow in. This is not the actual phytoplankton itself. So what the scientist said is, yes, Jacob, you could get some of this this type of plankton, but it will all die when you have people swimming in it. And of course, we have to purify our water. And there are, again, very specific conditions and climate that we're not going to be able to mimic in Atlanta or really anywhere. So even though I thought, this is $26, I could just keep dumping in these liters, that won't work. Again, this is merely the medium. It's not even the plankton itself. So then I went back to what I call this option 1 of the scientists. And as I mentioned before, they were saying, this isn't something that can be done. When you put this plankton in your water, it will just die. And what they explained to me is that there was no alternative. There's no way that we're going to be able to make this work, because, as they explained, bioluminescence is something that's been studied for decades. There's someone who won a Nobel for their work on it, and what they explained to me is, it's not even totally understood how bioluminescence works. There's still laboratories which are studying bioluminescence. So given that it's been studied for decades and there's still discovery going on in understanding how it works, this is not a viable path. So that's when I switched to option 2. So I felt the magic is the light. So maybe there's a way in which we can recreate spotlights at the base of our pool and at perimeter of water. And these spotlights will be very sophisticated. They'll track where people move, and using some sort of infrared wristband that we give them when they come into our venue. And when they're moving around in the pool, we'll have these powerful spotlights that track them from underneath, and it replicates the type of feeling that you get at the bioluminescent bays that you experience in areas such as Costa Rica. So I met with these very sophisticated lighting companies who most of their projects involve concerts and music festivals. And when I had a meeting with one of them and they asked me, I eventually had to admit how I plan to utilize them at our venue. And I said, we're going to track people in these pools. They thought I was crazy, given the other types of projects they work on. But what I then learned is they also said it just will not work because of the laws of physics. So when light hits water, it refracts. And in general, a property of light is it spreads out. And if you were to shine a flashlight at a bottle of water, even if your flashlight is very narrow, the light is going to spread out. So the effect that we're doing of tracking where people move using spotlights from underneath doesn't work. They said an alternative is we could just put a spotlight above the pool that tracks people. But obviously this doesn't work. This is going to a theater. This is just putting on a play on a stage and shining a light at you. There's no magic to it. You see the spotlight above you. If you moved your head up, you'd be blinded by a spotlight. This clearly is not magical. You know why you're being lit up. So therefore, I had to make a decision. Am I going to have bioluminescent bays? Or, and if I am, what approach am I going to use? Because these were the only two approaches that my design team and I could think of between the scientists and lighting. So what I decided was, after my meeting with the lighting company, is the scientists said, this is something that's still being understood. However, it's not impossible. Just because it's been researched for decades doesn't mean that we can't figure something out. Versus the alternative, the lighting company said, this is actually impossible. These are the laws of physics. So therefore, I went back to option one, to the people who said that this has still been studied for decades, but we don't totally know how it works. And as I've worked on the venue, although I'm no scientist, what I've noticed is that there are times in which we could be more practical in order to recreate things, and it doesn't require expertise like how one could imagine. There are innovative ways that we've created some of these pools and some of the architectural features, especially doing this in a place in which these things aren't native. As you might be able to imagine, when we want to build a pagoda in Japan, there are very few pagoda structures that a contractor or designer has worked on here in the US. But we've been able to do it. We thought practically and we innovated. And this was an example of it too, where I felt we could be innovative while also being practical. And that could be our edge over what some of these scientists had mentioned. So I ended up, so although they said it was impossible, some of these scientists, I thought on my own of what I thought would be practical. I read some publications on JSTOR to understand how bioluminescence works with different properties and plants and the phytoplankton that I showed you before. And I did devise a solution on what I thought would be a practical way to recreate it using almost beads. And these beads will have a reaction in them that incorporates some of the elements that you see in bioluminescence of algae. And so what I did was I met with two students who are experts. One of them was a postgrad student who understood bioluminescence, and I shared with them my idea, and I convinced them. I convinced the two of them to live with me for 2 weeks. I made a makeshift laboratory in my house, and they worked. And the evenings, I came back with them, and we had a great time. But we really innovated to see, can we recreate this bioluminescence? So we did it out of my own kitchen. I'm pleased to say that we did, that we've recreated the bioluminescence, our practical way of doing it. And it's also innovative, has done it. And to my knowledge, we are going to be the first ones in the world to have recreated bioluminescence in a large pool. So what I wanted to share from this is this message that when you lead, when you make sure that your decisions are being led by the experience, by the purpose, all the business will follow. There's if I were to take if I were to say, what is the net present value of doing this decision, or what is the expected value of doing this decision, of continuing to try to innovate to recreate bioluminescent pools, we wouldn't do it. There's no model that would tell you that you should do something like this when one group says it's impossible because of the laws of physics, and the other group says this has been studied for decades and we still don't totally know how it works. Obviously, your model is going to tell you don't invest any more time or money into it. But that's not what drives us. And it's not intuitive, this message. It's not intuitive to me, meaning at Wharton, a class I took was I took classes on corporate valuations and buyouts and restructurings. And you wouldn't be making a decision based on what I've just described. You're definitely not going to make a decision of, let's recreate bioluminescence just because I'm so focused on guest experience. But in our case, my goal is creating the best experience possible. And that means letting the experience drive decision making, not what some expected value in a model or discounting some cash flow will tell you of some investment, of making that type of decision. And the returns have been priceless under this method. And it's helped create something really extraordinary and magical for people. And it's part of the reason why people across the country are reaching out to us already to talk about our venue, because they see the way in which we put the experience first. So the message that I'm humbly sharing about what these simple Plankton taught me, and I hope they can teach everyone, is how we need to let experience, or let our purpose drive the decisions we make, and not just some number in an Excel model. Thank you all for your time, and it's really a pleasure, and I'm grateful to support this summit and the tremendous work that Harsh and her team do in terms of spreading education to places around the world. So thank you again for your time, and all the best.